This is Sally Knyvette.
Welcome to episode 2 of Blake 7, The Way Back. I'm Philip.
I'm Dwayne.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Todd.
We are talking today about the second episode of Blake 7, titled Spacefall by Terry Nation. This was directed by Pennant Robbins and first transmitted on the 9th of January in 1978. There were 7.3 million viewers who watched this, which is about the same number as the first episode, and it ranked 73 for the week. It was filmed at Ealing Studios in September. It rehearsed at the North Acton Studios in October and was recorded on the 1st and 2nd of November in 1977, only 2 months before transmission. This is what it's about. Thanks, Dwayne.
Blake and his companions are on the prison space transporter bound for Cygnus Alpha, but Blake has no intention of spending the rest of his life as a convict on a penal planet.
Fantastic. So let's quickly run around the room. What were people's quick impressions about this episode after the first one? Dwayne?
Before we started recording, you were talking about this, and even last week's episode in 3 parts. And yeah, these couple of episodes are definitely 3-act plays, aren't they? And this one, to me, I always get to the end of this and think, boy, there was a lot in that. It always feels a lot longer to me than it actually is, but not in a bad way, in a very good way. It's very confusing, but I love it.
Chris?
Yeah, I thought it was a solid follow-on from episode 1. I agree with Dwayne. I have felt that they feel longer as well, but in a good way too. So I'm glad he brought that up. But yeah, I thought it was a pretty strong second episode.
Todd?
Yes, I agree. I think I actually prefer it to the first episode because we're in space on a spaceship and we get to see some of the regulars or more of the regulars. And so I thought it was really strong.
Great. In fact, when this was shown in Australia for the first time, episode 1 and 2 were combined together to make it a movie. So it was actually a movie-length episode. Now, I just quickly want to ask people too, when did they first see the episode? What's their first memory of this episode?
My first memory would have been on the compilation VHS because it was virtually unedited on that. So I have a stronger memory of this episode than the actual episode 1, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it was January or February this year.
I think it was just when the box sets came out, the DVD box sets came out in the early 2000s. I don't think I saw it before then.
Okay. Now, this was the first one I saw on TV. So for the second rerun of Blake 7, I didn't see it when it first came out. I joined for season C when they did the repeats. And after season C, they had a couple month break and they went back to season A and showed A, B, and C. And I missed the first episode. I missed The Way Back. I'd missed it, and then in the TV program, good old TV week, I saw Blake 7 was back on, and I stayed up and watched this very late because I was quite young. But this was the first episode I saw in full, and I would see 2, 3, and 4, but I then miss The Web and a few others along the way. But my strongest memory of it is actually that video combination, episode 1 to 4. So that's my memory of this. Chris just mentioned he saw this episode a couple of months back for the first time. So let's go backwards in time and just chat with him about before he saw it, what he was expecting. And let's get his impressions straight after he saw this episode a couple of months ago. So let's fly back in time. Well, Chris, welcome back. You're getting ready to watch the second episode of Blake 7 now.
I am looking forward to it. Yes.
What are you expecting after the first one?
Well, I think this one might be quite slow. I think this is going to be more him arrive at Prison Planet. So I think it'll be him getting there, meeting new people. Hopefully I'll get to we'll find out who these 7 are. I'm guessing maybe Jenna might be one of his 7. and possibly the thief guy that was in the that stole his watch and then gave it back. I can't remember his name either now. Yeah, but I think maybe he's one of the 7 as well. So I think this might be a bit of a slower one, and just setting himself up on the planet really, and finding out maybe that his lawyer is dead. So yeah, look forward to seeing what's happened.
Okay, well, let's find out if you're right or not. So let's go watch episode 2, and we'll be back soon.
All right, great.
Well, Chris, welcome back. You've just come from watching Space 4, episode 2 of the first season.
I have.
Find it.
I actually quite liked that one. I actually liked it more than the first one, I think. I quite enjoyed it. It's adding in a bit of mystery. That ship has appeared. Blake's ship, I guess it is. The one that's in the opening credits. And those seats, I want to call them thrones. They almost look like thrones. And I keep counting them, but I think there's only 6. So I don't know what the relevance of that has got to do with the 7. I'm still trying to figure out what this 7 means with Blake. It's really bugging me, but I really liked it. Yeah, I wasn't expecting a mystery ship to appear halfway through and empty. So I'm really looking forward to finding out where that's come from. I wasn't expecting them to sort of fly into a war either, or whatever they flew into, because it wasn't really clear what that was. It was quite a good episode.
Yeah, its flight deck set is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I have to admit, I liked all the sets actually. I thought they did even the model sets, the space model sets with the spaceship. I thought they were really great. One thing I had never seen before. I've seen sets fly over planets before, but I hadn't actually seen one with planet rotating. There was a green planet that was rotating. I thought they did a really good job with all that.
Yeah, I actually watched it yesterday I just watched it with the new special effects.
Oh yes, yep.
You know what? The old special effects still stand up just as well, I think, to the new stuff.
Yeah, I have to agree. I thought they were really good. Probably my nieces and nephew, if I would show them that, they would probably say that looks terrible. But but I thought they looked great. Yeah, much better than CGI effects and things like that. Yeah.
So how are you finding Blake? What do you think about him now as a character?
Quite like him. He seems like a pretty good character. I don't recognize him from anything else, so I've never seen the actor before, but I like what he's doing so far. Yeah, great episode. I liked Riker dying at the end, that little doll flying through the air as he was sucked out of the air thing. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, but that tube looked fantastic, didn't it? So there's a bit up and down it.
It did look really good, yeah. I was very impressed with that too. They did a great job. But the BBC, I think, they always did a great job with a lot of their sets. Some of them wobble, yeah, occasionally, but overall, I think they did a really good job back then.
So, anything else you want to say about the characters, plots?
Oh, the other guy from Time Lash, Avon. That's right. Yes, Kerr Avon. Yeah, I recognised him. He reminds me a lot of the guy from David McCallum. I always just think of David McCallum when I see him, but I know it's not him. He's an interesting character. I'm not sure if he's going to backstab them later on down the track. I've got a feeling he probably will. And I think he's a fairly important character in the whole series, I think. So I'm pretty sure he's in most of the series from my understanding. So he'll be an interesting character to watch. But they've laid a few more breadcrumbs down now. So I'm actually looking forward to the 3rd episode, seeing where it's going. I absolutely have no idea. I don't know what to expect. I wasn't expecting it to go off onto that ship and find that empty ship. Yeah, it kind of reminds me a lot of different shows down the track, kind of Ghost Ship. It kind of reminds me of. It reminds me of Event Horizon almost as well, because where's that ship come from? I've got no idea where it's going to go. Well, I think so. Avon's obviously one of the 7, and Jenna is obviously one of the 7. And now I'm not sure if it means that there are 7 and Blake's not one of the 7, or if Blake is part of the 7. I'm not sure. The thief, that thief guy, the cowardly guy. Yes, Villa, that's right. Him, Michael Keating, I think you said his name was. Yeah. But then also Avon, I have a feeling is going to turn bad. So I don't know if he's going to be part of the 7 or not. Yeah. Because I just got a feeling that he's going to be bad, because he's just got that vibe about him that he's just doing it for himself until, if he needs to flip on a dime to go on the opposite way and to go against Blake, if that's going to save his ass, then I reckon he'd do that. So yeah, I'm really confused. I don't know what the 7 is going to be.
Thanks for your comments, and we'll talk to you before you watch the third episode.
All right, thank you. All right, see you later.
Bye. Well, that was Chris's impression back then. We're here now. Let's analyze this episode with a bit more detail, though. So, who wants to kick us off? What are people's impressions in terms of that first act? When they first land, it almost takes up immediately from the previous episode with them leaving Earth. What were people's impressions and what struck people?
The opening shot was of the same room that wasn't of the same room. I think it was of the ship flying off through space, and then we got that shot where Blake was undergoing discipline in the previous episode. So we saw that same room again, but then it all opened up and we saw the ship wasn't a great deal bigger than it was the first time we saw it, but totally BBC, very dirty, very gritty, and not shiny like Star Trek or anything like that. So it had a completely different feel to anything else I'd ever seen before in terms of a space drama.
What struck me first off was the chairs that they were all sitting on, actually. All of them, Jenna was the only one who's got a different chair. I don't know if anyone's noticed that. Hers had wheels on it, and no one else did. So she could just be wheeled off if need be. For me, it just reminded me of a BBC space drama, to be honest. I like that it went directly in. It went sort of followed on directly into from episode 1. I could see them joining it together and making it a movie. Actually, I could see that doing that very well. So, yeah, I thought it was really good.
Because this episode was actually filmed first. This was filmed before The Way Back was. So this is the first time because they wanted the cast to spend time together to get to know each other, and this is how they did it. Todd,
I think it's interesting because you've got at the end of the last episode, they all come aboard the spaceship and they sit down, and then you've got them sitting down again, but it sort of expands to an extra column. So you see Gan for the first time. And my question is, are the guards the same? Are all the people sitting in the chair the same extras? And I didn't really take note.
The guard is definitely different because definitely the guard who put them onto the ship had a different voice altogether. So he had a very distinctive voice, and that's what I remember from that. And he's nowhere to be found here in this one. So maybe he was just in charge of the remand area as they were loading them onto the ship. So yeah, I think there was a bit of a crossover of guards here that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, so the Way Back scenes were filmed 2 weeks after this. So they put the set back together again, or half the set back together again to film in the Way Back block of time. And so, yeah, all the extras are different. The guards are all different. I think they've got Blake and Jen in the same seats, but yeah, other people are quite different. And of course, they've added that whole second row of people. And of course, for the first time, not only do you see Gan, we see Avon, and it's interesting. They're all just sitting there immobile, and you think these are going to become major characters, but we don't know that yet because Terry Nation's playing with us because we don't actually know who the 7 are.
I think it's quite interesting because, like, you're so used to in modern day television having all the characters introduced within the first 60 minutes of a show, really, or if they do a 90-minute thing, and. So just to suddenly have random people sitting there, like, we know who they are now, but if you're watching it, you've got no idea. And like, were they just in another cell last episode, just around the corner, and they were all marched in, you know? Whereas in modern television, they probably would have been in the same cell with Blake. So I find that very interesting that we really don't know. And we don't know even throughout this episode, I guess, you know, who's actually going to come on board, because at one point, I remember watching this originally and thinking, oh, Nova's going to come on board. Like, suddenly he's this young guy and he wants to volunteer for things. And then, well, you know, bad luck, really.
Yes.
Yeah, one of the things that strikes me in terms of this whole episode, and even the previous one, is that we're introduced to this mighty federation, this all-powerful federation, this conquered planets, that rules, and yet when you actually see the people and you see what's around them, it's actually not glamorous at all. So the Dome City was, you know, it was ordinary. It wasn't flash. It wasn't nice. Here we have this ship, which is a cargo ship that's been repurposed. We're not seeing the Federation in terms of its height of its power. It feels like a empire that long ago reached its heights of power and prosperity for the people, and now it's in decline.
The flight deck is not impressive. Like, you know, it's a very BBC Doctor Who sort of flight deck all coupled together with the 1970s stuff. And then you see their mess area, which is, some bunks and, tables and chairs. And you never do get to see, I think, they're on this spaceship for how long? We never do get to see the lavatory. Like, I don't think we ever do in many science fiction shows. It's always off to the left or to the right.
And I'm not sure you ever see anyone go to the bathroom in Blake 7 either.
They did make note, though, that Jenna was the only female on there, and they didn't have female amenities and things like that. So they did kind of point that out. You did get a kind of feeling that it was a pretty small ship, yeah.
So that kind of leads us into the flight deck, and we meet the three characters who are going to be fairly central in terms of the characters of the Federation. So Leyland, Riker, and Artix. What are people's impression in terms of how Terry Nation was writing for them and these three characters? What stood out? What things impressed you? Did impress you, Dwayne?
The first thing I noticed was that I recognised all of them from Doctor Who. They had large parts in previous Doctor Who stories. I liked the way he was doing the exposition by Artix on the radio, giving all their flight plans and details and things like that. I thought that was a clever way of doing it rather than just having a conversation. So we got a lot of the exposition that way. Glyn Owen as Leyland was very tired even before they started. So imagine how tired he was by the time they do get to Cygnus Alpha. But they were such different characters. I thought they were really well cast, and they really sparked well off each other, I thought. I was very entertained by them.
With you saying that, like, it came across to me like the captain seemed to be quite a reasonable man, even in those early scenes. And Artix had his job to do. Raker was the one that I was going, okay, science fiction trope number 2 in the second in command is often not a nice person.
Yeah.
And that's where we're heading with that. But he wasn't overly not nice to begin with. But then, of course, when he comes in and has some words with Avon and making him call him sir, and then his talk with Jenna, very interesting. And the fact that she gets to stand up to him and actually say something that we don't hear is, I think, very powerful.
What's your name?
Jenna Stanis.
Unfortunately, Jenna, there are no special facilities for female prisoners. But if you should find things difficult, I might be able to arrange something more comfortable.
That's very considerate of you.
Why make it hard on yourself?
Why, indeed?
You'll come round. I can be very persuasive.
Yeah. I actually think Leyland may be a lot... I used to always see him as quite a nice character compared to the others. But watching it again this episode, I was just thinking, I actually think he's actually pretty awful. Because here he's in charge. He knows what Riker's up to and what he's like. So with Riker going off to address the prisoners, Leyland says...
There's a female prisoner on our manifest.
I'd noticed that, sir.
Yes, well, be discreet.
Yes, sir.
So Leyland is fully aware of what Riker's like because he's done it in the past. He doesn't try and stop him. He doesn't try and moderate the behaviour. It's just he tells him to be discreet. All he seems to care about is that the appearances are right. And in fact, he doesn't really criticise Riker for killing the prisoners. Well, not in terms of he's a bit critical in terms of when Arctic is there. But he gives him full permission to do what he's going to do, and he knows what he's like. So I actually think Leyland's... and I don't think he's even a weak leader. I think he's just a leader who just doesn't care what people do, aren't seen to be doing the wrong thing. And so if Arctic is there, who's the young, keen one who wants promotion, he's always saying the right thing. But once Arctic isn't there, you see the character slip away, and he's just cynical, and I think still pretty nasty too, because he doesn't stop, but he could stop.
I thought he just seemed a bit beaten down and tired, to be honest, but also a little bit, he seemed a bit fatherly towards Atrix. Was that his name? Atrax or Atrix?
Artix.
Yeah, it was a point where he was asking him about his career and what he wanted to do while he was at the while he was sitting there at the scanner. So I got kind of a fatherly kind of figure almost there. But I also thought he seemed a bit tired and just sort of beaten down, and just like you said, he knew exactly what Riker was doing, but he just, I can't be bothered. I can't be bothered standing up to it. What's the point?
It's interesting that you brought that up, Philip, and Chris, your point of view on that too, because as I reflected on it, like, my initial impressions were that he was a fairly nice person, but he was quite, reasonable, I guess, in his negotiations with Blake later on, giving him options to do the right thing or the right thing by him. But certainly, as you said, he's very complicit in allowing Raker to do whatever he wants to do, so long as it doesn't get him in trouble. And he's quite happy to go to a tribunal and put everything in the logs and be everything, like crossing his I's and dotting his T's. And so he doesn't get into trouble. He's following the rules and he's doing the right thing. But as you said, he's quite happy to sort of turn a blind eye up to a point in order to make sure that everything runs the way it needs to run.
And as in front of Artix, he always says the right thing because he's going to want someone. If there's a tribunal, he's going to want someone backing him up and saying, "Oh no, he was doing the right thing." But in private, the conversations he has, what he says to Riker, the willingness to send Blake over, I suspect that he's in private, he's a very different person. He's just a lot more political. He's not outright evil like Riker is, but certainly he doesn't care about what's going on, and he has his own agenda to fulfill. He just wants to get the job done and get back. But who cares what other people do, as long as it doesn't affect his career in the long run.
One thing I did notice when they took off, he said to Raker,
Oh, and use the highest level of suppressants in the prisoners' rations. I like them docile.
So I don't think, in a lot of places, I don't think I've seen in Blake 7 anyone who isn't being suppressed by the Federation somehow, who isn't in the military. So it seems that you've got to be in the military to be off the suppressants and keep everyone under control. So I guess that's what people might have been aspiring to, although were they in the military or were they just in the prison system? No, they weren't really the military, were they? That was more of a civil service type thing, but any kind of service to the Federation itself, everyone else seemed to be being medicated somehow.
So
I also thought when Raker went and had his conversation with Blake and worked out who Blake was, he sat down and started talking about the charges, which I was looking at last week's episode, it would have been last week when it was screened, the way back, looking at that episode on the charge sheet, how they described it, and it wasn't described in outright. It was kind of suggested, but this time Raker said,
Something of a come down for a leader of men, isn't it? Molesting kids.
The charges were false.
Oh, yes, of course.
so he said it out loud. This was the first time he said it, and we hadn't got that in the previous episode. I thought that was interesting too.
Well, I noticed that as well. I thought they brushed over that. Again, they just went, oh, child molester, and then moved on. Whereas I think in a normal prison, they're the kind of worst. Most prisoners go after the child molesters. So it kind of made me think that they knew the charges were all just crap. They weren't, they were just made up to get him off planet.
as a spoiler, that is the last time the charges are ever mentioned on Blake. So never again is it raised about the fact that he was charged with being a child molester. It's never mentioned again. Yeah, it's sort of something that they wanted to put out there for a character for the first couple of episodes, and then after that they wanted to just keep it down because it wasn't helpful probably for the character to keep discussing it. So what do we think about these different prisoners we're meeting? So who are we meeting, and what's your impressions of them as we get to them?
Well, I couldn't help but think when Jenna was having her discussion with Raker and he was offering her comforts and things like that if she wanted to, and she whispered in his ear. I wanted to know what she whispered to make him react like that.
Yeah, I wanted to know too.
Yeah, well, my imagination was going, what could she have said?
Something you can't repeat on television.
Exactly.
And boy, doesn't she get a slap from him too?
Yes, actually she really does, doesn't she?
Some good acting there. But back to your question about, she starts talking to a young guy that's Nova, but doesn't, say very much. But then Villa, or do I want to call him Vila, according to Gan, which obviously indicates, as Philip said, this is the first thing recorded, because he says it not once but twice in the episode. And I'm just there going, oh, it's like nails on a chalkboard. But Vila obviously introduces Avon. And I think pretty much straight away you realise that this person is going to be part of the crew because he's such a focus.
I mean, we're pretty confident that we've got Jenna already because she was in the credits last week and she's carried over, and Villa. They've both carried on from the first episode, so in all likelihood that's two. But yeah, Avon is standing out, Gan is standing out, but then also Nova is certainly standing out as well because he's young, he's enthusiastic, he's exactly the sort of person you'd want as a under you, because if you're trying to lead a crew of people, he's so enthusiastic and willing to do anything.
Have we cut to 4 months later by the time we get to know him? What was the moment where we cut? Was it that scene 4 months later Was it the scene where Blake was going through the tunnels? Was that the 4 months later bit?
That's 4 months later. So they do an outside shot of the ship. Just actually, they do a couple of shots of the London. Great name for a spaceship, isn't it? They call it the London. So obviously some sort of future of Earth type. So they have a couple of shots of the London flying past planets, and then you're suddenly inside those corridors. So those were the first scenes shot at Ealing Studios. There was actually no need for this episode to actually have filming at Ealing, but the reason why they did it was just in terms of how they organized the episodes was that each episode would have 2 days in studio and 1 day of filming. And so they needed to set up some sets and some things in studio for this episode because there was no location filming needed. And so that's how they did it, was they put up a few sets. And so anything in those corridors was at Ealing, and also the computer room was also at Ealing. So those were the first scenes shot at Ealing Studios.
And you can feel the difference. Like I feel the difference between the two.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
But it is interesting, like that those shots in the service ducts, right, have a point of view from Blake who's going through, like from his point of view, which is very different to like Doctor Who and things like that. And this is Pennant Roberts directing, and Pennant Roberts directs, I know him from Doctor Who, and he's all the stories that he directs, I think, have some sort of failing, and certainly towards the end of his time there's more failings than early on. So I was actually quite surprised by his direction here, that he's actually, I think, really quite, those things are really good. There's actually quite a lot that I like.
What shows do you direct on Doctor Who? Do you know, Todd, some of them?
Yes, he does The Face of Evil, The Sunmakers, The Pirate Planet, Sharda, Warriors of the Deep, and Time Lash. So if you are a Doctor Who fan, you will know these shows. And the last two, Warriors of the Deep and Time Lash, perhaps don't have the best reputations, although I quite like both of them. And I guess if I'm putting my own goggles on, The Face of Evil, The Sunmakers, The Pirate Planet, and even Sharda, I think have some good aspects and some weaker aspects.
He seems to be a much better director on film and location than he does in studio. Would that be fair to say? I'm just thinking Sharda, or the location stuff is wonderful, The Face of Evil, or the things they do in at the Ealing Film Studios, or the jungle stuff.
Jungle stuff is great in Face of Evil, yeah.
Even the Sunmakers, I'm just thinking the stuff outside is all pretty tight and things. So maybe he just doesn't like the studio.
Maybe. But he does a good job here, I think, generally. We do have some interesting fights going on. I mean, what do you think of the fights in this episode? Philip, you said a moment, like Gan stands out. He doesn't stand out to me for quite some time in the episode. He's just this big guy in the background with a couple of lines. And perhaps it's only, in the second half that after Nova's met his fate in the service duct, which I actually, when I first watched it, found that quite horrific. The fact that there was the penetration of the outer hull, and then he's trying to stop that, and then all the gunk comes in. I thought that was quite horrific, really. But back to what I was saying. I just felt that Gan didn't really stand out.
I think the first person that stood out as a cast member to me was probably Villa, or Vila, should we say, as in Port Vila. Especially that scene where he goes and talks to the guard and plays his trick on him so that Blake can get out of the service hatch. We get to start to know what Villa's like, and I was looking out for him being a bit more cowardly in this, but he wasn't, because he wasn't cowardly in the first episode, and he was not too cowardly in this one either, apart from when he said to Nova, "Okay, off you go," which is fortunate for him. Obviously.
Well, in many ways, it had to be Nova, because the whole thing was the guard needed to be distracted, and so Villa's role was crucial in terms of distracting the guard. And so how could you send Villa down the tunnel? I mean, how would you distract the guard? I was going to say, just in terms of Terry Nation, he does like to take tropes from other things, and there's so many tropes he takes from prison movies, escape movies in this. In terms of you've got the hidden corridor, you've got distracting the guard, you've got people missing when they've all the urgency they've got to get back again. You've got security cameras that go off, but the doors haven't opened. There's actually an awful lot of stuff in this episode that you can see Terry has lifted from other famous films and escape movies.
Bit of The Great Escape in there, isn't there?
I'm just going to say, and I'm going to be not contradicting you, Dwayne, but I actually think that Villa's card trick with the guard is rather pathetic, with the coin behind the ear, because we've seen it all before. And I actually think him not wanting to go was actually quite cowardly. I actually thought, oh no, you are suddenly suddenly you are quite cowardly. Like, I actually felt that was a ramp up from the first episode all around that sequence. And I thought, oh, you're a bit of a wuss there. You know, you really are just a bit of a weasel, if I can put it like that. That's how him getting out of that came across. And of course, you know, once Blake gets back from his first time in the service duct, that's when we find out that it's, you know, 4 months, because Avon says, give me one good reason I should help you. And Blake mentions, well, you've had 4 months to think of a plan. I really like the attitude of Avon throughout all this. He's like the antagonist to Blake. That fight sequence that he has to do when he goes off to, what's that? Where does he go to?
The computer room.
Into the computer room. When he has that fight sequence with that guy and he's like, you know, pushing on his mouth and that, you know, it's sort of like, is he going to be the sort of the action hero of the show? Do you know what I mean? Like, with all these little fight sequences.
It's an interesting fight because it's it's so dirty. It really is street fighting, and both it's in American TV shows. If you were having a fight scene, both people would be these expert fighters who know how to punch and duck and weave. It's always beautifully choreographed. Here you have this fight scene that just looks dirty. It looks real because it's two people who wouldn't know how to fight. I mean, you know, we'll later find out in terms of Avon's background. I mean, he's, you know, grown up as a, you know, fairly middle class and as a technician, and the other person's a computer person. They're both nerdy people who are having this dirty fight for survival, and so it looks dirty. And I think that's actually really good direction for that reason.
I think being on film helps as well. The film makes it feel a bit grittier as well. I like the film sequence a lot more in this series, especially the tunnels. And when Nova got it, and then he was never mentioned again. No, I don't think they ever asked where Nova is, what all happened. They never acknowledged he's just gone. And what a way to go! He's frozen in foam in the insides of a spaceship. He may.
He's still there with them.
In my head. Yeah, exactly.
Terrible. It's terrible. But it's interesting how they introduce, like, there's a space battle going on quite early, right, in the episode. So then it comes back into play throughout the episode at crucial points, you know, when they're attacked, and then with another random spaceship turning up 38 minutes into the episode.
I was thinking about the plan that they were kicking themselves in giving to Avon to go and dump them in the middle of space. Like, why have the crew, are the crew so silly that they haven't thought of that by themselves? It's not if they're getting the same money for the contract, whether they deliver them or not. Why hasn't someone thought of this already, especially Raker?
They do explain that. They say that the computer logs are the issue. And so why Avon thinks he might be useful is because he can change the computer logs so that it doesn't show they've dumped them. I think what it partly shows, I think, actually, is the fact that it's interesting that these prisoners are being moved to a colony planet. Okay, they're obviously sort of the worst. They don't want to leave them on Earth. They don't put them in jail. They do want to send them to this colony planet to send them off because they're bad. But obviously there's enough people on Earth thinking that these people might be worthy and they need to know what's happened to them. So, you know, because all of them sort of must be sort of famous in some sort. We know that Jenna is famous because she's well known as a smuggler. Blake's notorious, even though he's a child molester, he's notorious because he was known for this rebellion in the past. It's almost like these prisoners are all very well-known figures, and therefore people are going to know what's happened to them in the end. And so whereas they could just take them and kill them and dump them, which is what happened to Blake's family, that when they arrived in the outer worlds, they were just killed. There must be people back in the Federation who are watching. A bit like the lawyer and his wife last week, who ended up having to be killed because they investigated too hard. But it's almost like the Federation must have a group of people watching out, watching what's going on. And if these prisoners didn't arrive safely, there'd be noises made. And so therefore they're moving them onto another planet, and all the logs and everything has to show that they're safe and well. So it's just another side of it.
But I like the fact that you brought that up, Jane, because I actually think it's really, I would never have thought of it. And as they talk about it, like, I kind of went, oh, like, you know, I think that's actually really good writing, you know, to sort of put this suspicion onto a character who could do this sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? I actually really, really did like that. I also really liked the comedy moment when Gan says, move and you're dead.
Stay right there, and we'll kill them. Drop your guns. Move, and you're dead. Feeler.
I got confused.
Hands on your heads. Now move. Single file.
I thought that was good. That was a good bit of character moment to actually set up what sort of character he's like. Yeah.
So did you agree, Chris? Did you like that moment? Or did you think it made Villa look weak and silly?
I did think it made him look a bit silly dropping the gun. I'm like, why would you think he was telling you to drop the gun? Like, yeah, I can see the comedy in it, but I did think it was a little bit silly. And
I think endearing more than silly.
I didn't get endearing.
It does lead to another prisoner being immediately killed. An prisoner. So people have very mixed about that scene in terms of, is it funny and endearing, or is it actually, does it really make Villa weaker than he should be? I've always laughed at the scene. I've always found it funny. But the fact is that immediately followed by a guard shooting someone is actually pretty bleak as well, which is just an interesting aside. And one of the things is in terms of...
Sorry, can I just jump back to the 4 months thing? Did we ever get it established that Blake's memories are starting to come back? Because in the first episode, his memories of his family were kind of blocked. But there he's making comments about how they killed his family. He wants to get justice for his family who have been killed. So his memories seem to be starting to come back. So is that established, or is that just sort of appear in the dialogue?
I got the impression the way back when he witnesses the massacre of all the people, that all his memories come back at that point. That my understanding is that he gets all his memories back by then. But so by the time he's in prison, he fully knows his past because it's all come back to him.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I just thought he would have gaps in. I just thought he had gaps in his memory.
Because don't forget, in the first episode, he's yelling at the sky saying, "I can't remember." That's after the massacre scene.
I just think that the time frame by now, I think a lot of it's come back. I don't know if all of it's come back, and I don't know if that's clear. It's certainly not quite clear to me. But what is clear is that Raker starts killing prisoners when plans go awry, and that's pretty bleak, like every 30 seconds, and a couple of them get rubbish deaths on screen. Perhaps not the best direction for a few of those. I had to raise a smile going, okay, some of our extras are earning their £100 for the day or whatever they get.
Or not earning. I was trying to remember, is there a scene where the Daleks do the same thing? Where the Daleks line up prisoners and start shooting people?
Yeah, Destiny.
Just the Daleks. There you go.
Yep. Which was the next year, wasn't it? After this.
So what a surprise. Terry Nation reuses an idea.
Copying himself, yeah. He's never done that.
At this point in the episode, I really think we're so far in that we need to find out who's been in who. Here, I recognised about 3 people maximum.
Three people
from Doctor Who, which was the Captain and Raker, and no, actually, they're the only 2 I actually recognised.
Yeah, I got those. I did get those 2, and I got one other.
Can I just quickly run through some of the appearances of the regular cast, get those over and done with once and for all?
What a fiasco. You could take over the ship, you said, if I did my bit. Well, I did my bit, and what happened? Your troops bumble around looking for someone to surrender to, and when they've succeeded, you follow suit.
Because, of course, Paul Darrow, who knows the episodes he was in?
Time Lash and Silurians.
And he also appeared once in a Big Finish Doctor Who, which was The Next Life. He played Keraz's dad. Divergent arc.
Yep.
So Michael Keating, of course, he was in one Doctor Who episode on television.
The Sunmakers.
With Pennant Roberts.
Directed by Pennant Roberts.
So Pennant,
exactly.
You had a... Yep.
And Pennant directed Time Lash as well. So, there.
Oh, yes.
So Philip, as a Big Finish aficionado, Big Finish Doctor Who's as well. Do you know what they are?
Michael Keating, he was in the Divergent universe as well.
That was called
The One in the Cave.
The Twilight Kingdom.
The Twilight Kingdom.
He was also in The Year of the Pig with Maureen
right.
O'Brien, and he was in The Evil One, which is a 4th Doctor and Leela episode. He was in that too, so he appears with them again. And of course, Sally Knyvette never appeared in Doctor Who on television, but she is famous for one Doctor Who. I'm sure, Todd, you know which one.
It's Spare Parts.
Spare Parts, of course.
The Cyberman Origin one where she plays an evil doctor, doesn't she?
Well, not so much evil, bit immoral.
I remember it.
Gareth Thomas, of course, never appeared in a Doctor Who on television, but quite a few Big Finish Doctor Who's and sort of Doctor Who related. So he was in the first 8th Doctor story called Storm Warning. He was also major role, an excellent role in Dalek Empire as well,
Yeah, for sure.
which included Return of the Daleks. And he was also in a Fourth Doctor episode with that same season, I think, season 3, called Last of the Colophon. I can't even remember it, Philip, so I need to go back and listen to that one.
So Gareth Thomas was also in Torchwood. So not directly Blake 7, but he played a child molester in Torchwood.
David Jackson was in Sarah Jane Smith, Comeback, the very first Sarah Jane for Big Finish. Now, that's the regular cast. Who knows where Glyn Owen comes from?
Star Wars.
No.
Apart from that.
Is he in Star Wars?
He's Uncle Owen.
Is it the
Oh,
power
you're
of
kidding me.
He's Uncle Owen, Luke's
He
father.
is.
Luke's grand uncle, yeah.
And he's in The Power of Kroll as Roald Dutt. But which is the following year in Doctor Who, it's interesting. I could not place him for the life of me. And I was determined not to look him up. And it must have taken me 3 or 4 nights. You know, your brain just keeps on twirling. I thought, I know that delivery. I know it.
Since I've mentioned some Big Finish, Glyn Owen is also very famous for being in the unmentionable Big Finish story, the worst one that was ever made. Do you know what that one was? We can't even mention it.
No.
Necromantia. There you go. He was in that. Leslie Schofield, he was Raker. So anyone know he was in 2 TV Doctor Who episodes? Do you remember what they were?
The Face of Evil.
Face of Evil and?
It was the War Games.
Correct.
Yes, it was the War Games. You're right. We've seen him in the colour. He was also in Star Wars.
Yes, Star Wars.
He was,
That's where I recognised him from. But again, Face of Evil, directed by Pennant Roberts.
Yes. Norman Tipton, who was Artix, had 1 appearance in Doctor Who.
I know that one. I do. Underworld.
Underworld.
A show that I never watch. But again,
I love Underworld.
Just, the previous year in Doctor Who. So,
There was one other face that I recognised, and I knew he was in this particular episode, and that's Tom Kelly, who played Nova. He's actually been in 3 televised Doctor Who episodes.
Really?
But he had a speaking part in 1.
He looked familiar to me, but I couldn't place it. But he did look familiar.
So he was in the Face of Evil and the Sunmakers as guards, directed by Pennant Roberts. Therefore, he's been cast here.
Oh wow!
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
And the speaking part?
I had to look this up.
It was in the same
year
as
Invasion
the
of Time.
Sunmakers. Invasion of Time. He was one of the Vardens. He was Varden number 2.
That's where I recognise. That's now I know.
I wouldn't recognise him from that.
Yep.
So all of his big television stuff is from 1977 to 1978.
Yep. So there are some other people who played the guards. I've got just about all the guards have been in Doctor Who at some point. I cannot possibly go through every one of them because I'll be here for another 20 minutes. But there was Brett Forrest and Bill Weston. Bill Weston was interesting because he was in The Smugglers.
He's a stuntman though. By profession, he's a stuntman. Yep.
He was a stuntman, so he was probably involved in that fight scene. Harry Fielder's very big on the convention circuit, so he started off in The Seeds of Doom, and his last one was Castrovalva, and he was in a whole heap of episodes.
Anything significant?
No. But only 2 of those were credited. So Seeds of Doom and Armageddon Factor were the only ones that he was credited in, and he had all the rest of his parts were uncredited. So between Enemy of the World and Castrovalva, he's been in episodes. So the other stunt people are Stuart Myers, Roy Pearce, Terry Startane. Yeah, they were in heaps. They've got about between them probably 30 or 40 Doctor Who appearances. So massive appearances in there.
And what are their appearances? Are they just like guards or prisoners or things like that?
They're all guards, extras, Solonians, that kind of thing, One of them, I think Stuart Myers played a Draconian, so he would have been, probably next to the Prince in Frontier in Space, technician in Silurians, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I couldn't believe how many appearances these extras have had. They were going great guns in the late 60s and 70s.
Well, thank you, Dwayne. That was interesting to know that there's that many people and all of their little appearances.
Well, let's pop that back to what we're talking about. Just in terms of you've given away the fact that Gan is going to be a regular. I think most people would know that by now anyway. Gan, what's your impression of Gan as a character? I mean, the first time we actually see him, he's actually makes an impression is with that guard.
Look, we only need the hand. If you want to stay attached to it, do as you're told.
I'm not that impressed. I don't know what the other people think. I mean, he's okay. Like he's just this big guy that they just seem to use to like scare the guards and have some sort of knock 'em out sequence at some point and be with Villa, really. Like I just kind of thought, well, you know, if you were to cast the character today, I think you'd be casting somebody who would be like a bodybuilder type, really, rather than a large guy. But I just didn't think much.
He came across to me as a gentle giant, so you knew he was threatening them, but, you know, you could kind of tell from the outset that he was that kind of person. So you don't really get much of his character in this episode. His character comes through in later episodes. Like even in the next episode, he gets a lot more character stuff. And then particularly in the one after that, more character stuff again that we find out about him as we move along. But in Spacefall, unfortunately, yeah, there's not much to him except that he's the kind of big gentle guy to me.
He's kind of the next leader down. Once you lose Blake, Jenna, and Avon, he's the next leader because he's sort of leading the rebellion as best as he can, though he fails.
He does have like almost like a Little John kind of. I got a Little John kind of feel to him from Robin Hood, sort of the gentle giant, like Dwayne said. But you don't get much from him. And I think watching him, if I hadn't have known that he was going to be a regular character, I probably wouldn't have picked that he was going to be one of the regular characters. I would have thought he probably would have been killed off in an episode or two down the track, like everyone else seems to be.
Yeah,
I think that's a good observation, Chris. Like that's kind of, if I hadn't known when I first watched it that he was a regular, I wouldn't have thought him to be the character that was going to be around very long.
No, and it is a little bit confusing. Like you wouldn't have picked it up on your first watch, but I mean, he grabs the guard and chokes him and knocks him out. But then later on in later episodes, you find out that he shouldn't be able to do that. So first watching, it wouldn't have known that. It would have been a bit confusing later down the track, going, well, how did he do that? You know, when he's meant to have a chip in his head. So, yeah.
Because it is interesting that guard that they drag off at the beginning, you never see him again. You know, after we only need your hand, and they take him out. He's gone. He never appears again. Now it's partly probably because he didn't come back for the next recording day, the next night. But it's interesting in terms of characterization. Like, what have they done to that guard?
Probably health and safety. He's got 7 weeks off, paid leave.
It could be, and of course next week, Leyland will actually talk about the fact that 5 guards have been killed. We only see 4 killed in the show, I think, and so he must be the 5th one. And so obviously the prisoners have taken him outside and killed him, which does actually show they're a bit more ruthless than they come across a bit like jolly so-and-sos, but all of them are there because they're notorious criminals. But sometimes they don't quite play it that way. That's part of the problem with bit actors, I guess, and side actors. Just before we move to the final section, we've got the computer room. I love the vision of what computers are going to be like from the late 70s, because you have a computer room and this large computer. There's no software. I mean, computers all have to be manually. You've got to shut off circuits, turn on circuits. Our concept of what a computer is today is nothing like what they had back then. But it's just this beautiful computer room which allows for different scenes to happen. Okay, so finally, the whole rebellion collapses because of Raker's ruthlessness, and just that final straw is, even after they surrender, he shoots one more person just to even up. We then move into the situation where they're locked up, but then there's the space battle coming on. What are people's impression in terms of both the suspense and also the final reveal of what's going to happen with this spaceship?
What do you mean in terms of this other spaceship that's come aside, like they've run into? Can I just say that this spaceship that they've discovered is huge? It's huge compared to their little London ship. I was really surprised at the difference in the sizes.
And I've got to say that the special effects, because I'm watching the special effects version on the Blu-ray, new updated one, are absolutely sensational. And I love the way that they have done the new effects with models. It's not CGI, so it works really well that way. Liberator's sensational. The London is sensational. Their flight between planets is amazing. I don't think I can ever watch the original again. That's just me.
I need to watch it again. I must admit I haven't watched the episode with the new effects. I've only watched it and fast forwarded to find the effects. So maybe I need to be a bit more patient, actually watch the episode and see the effects. It's a beautiful reveal, isn't it, of this spaceship in terms of the music score. That they've been tracking it, they haven't been able to see it, and then suddenly it's there. It really is, in some ways, this is a major character of the show, and I guess we should have been expecting it because it is in the opening credits. But the reveal is actually so much more powerful than it is in the credits.
You're right. Like there's that musical sting when it actually does appear. I think it's absolutely hilarious that the transfer tube just fits nicely into the side of the Liberator. I just laugh about that, but I absolutely love that tube and the way it's realized, tent really, like coming down and just the way they're walking along it and all that. I absolutely adore it. And Raker's fate at the end, just the way that horrific when his cardboard cutout goes out the out the end of it.
It's a doll. It's not a cutout.
Not on the Blu-ray.
It's like one of those little figures that you cut out into to make like a string of little paper men or whatever. But I was horrified by that the first time I watched it. Like I thought it was great, but I was absolutely horrified. But also at the same time, well, you're just desserts. But yeah, no, I love that. But I do feel for all the guards who go across. It's one of these things where it's like, okay, we'll send you over and we'll send you over, and then there's certain timings, and then they're doesn't one of them get back and sent mad? Is that right? Yeah.
I do think the brilliance of Terry Nation, and something he does really well, is build suspense. So that with the coming, we're giving away the name of the ship. Spoilers, called the Liberator. It's just the ship in this episode is not named till next episode. But with the coming of the ship, it's just a dot on a screen. They hear something coming, they know it's there, and suddenly the reveal, it's big. And then with crossing into the ship, it's the same thing. You've got a guard talking, you hear the voice, you hear the description, a scream. Second guard goes in, more description. Another horrible scream. It's not until they finally decide, well, we don't lose any more guards, we'll use prisoners. And once again, I still think this shows Leyland's pretty ruthless. Oh yeah, prisoners don't matter. Yes, let's use Blake, Jenna, and Avon, because in some ways it'll be better for him if they're dead anyway, because they've got a story to tell, which is going to be good for him. But it's not till those three go across that they then do the reveal of the inside of the spaceship. What's your impression of the set when you first see it?
Wonderful.
Absolutely. Like it's like nothing you've ever really seen before. And I guess I'm coming to it with eyes of other spaceships, whether it be like all the different Star Trek Enterprises and all Defiance and all that sort of thing, or whether you watch something like Babylon 5 or Farscape with Moya and that sort of stuff. It's just so different to Doctor Who, like a standard set.
I mean, you mentioned before the flight deck of the London, which is pretty plain, pretty nothing, and then you contrast it with this flight deck. So you can see that they could have done anything they wanted with the first flight deck, but they've deliberately made this huge, impressive, fascinating. It's Roger Murray Leach who's the designer, and he both designed unusually the spaceship Liberator as well as the set. Usually the spaceship was actually designed by somebody else, and the producer actually said to Roger Murray Leach, will you have a look at the design and design me something so that the inside matches the outside? And so that design is actually by a designer, which is a bit of a conflict of interest, and that's what they went with. And it just, everything matches and merges beautifully in terms of Roger's work. I think, what did Roger Murray Leach do in Doctor Who? Ark in Space is the one that stands out for me.
Planet of Evil. He did the jungle set, didn't he?
He did the Deadly Assassin too. I mean, all our Gallifrey comes from Roger Murray Leach too. Are there other stories that we know he did?
And you can see similarities between the design of Gallifrey and the Liberator control room too. I can see them clearly.
Lots of fiberglass.
Oh, just the colours and things like that. And you can sort of, it's got this darkness about it and grittiness that you never got in Star Trek, even 60s Star Trek, which is really good. Battlestar Galactica was happening around the same time as well, which was trying to copy Star Wars. And so you can see where I think Firefly years later gets compared to Blake 7 a lot, like being inspired from, I think is it Joss Whedon?
Yes.
May have even been inspired by Blake 7 for Firefly.
Yeah, it was.
So that grittiness in there too.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because I was looking up shows that are set on spaceships around that same time, and I looked up shows that were directly influenced by Blake 7, and Firefly was. Josh Whedon has mentioned that it was directly influenced by Blake 7. Farscape was as well, and Babylon 5 were all inspired by Blake 7. So I thought that was interesting.
I guess we'll talk a bit more about the ship next week or the week after when we actually get to see more of the ship and what it can actually do.
So at the moment, it's a very impressive set. Chris, was there anything more you want to say about spaceships at that point?
There was a couple of other shows around the same time that were all based, like Space 1999, Battlestar Galactica, which you mentioned before, Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. There was a show called Star Maidens in 1976, which was a British-German show. Jason of Star Command, which I've never heard of either, and UFO. They were all sort of based on spaceships at the time.
It is interesting when they do get onto that ship that they terrible special effect, which I think is rubbish, but it's very oval, and it's sort of like, it reminds me of early on the scanner screen, which is very oval. They like all their oval shaped sort of, I think the wipe or whatever that you could do at the time with the visual effects was that. But I thought, oh dear, that is a very 1978 effect. I hope, Dwayne, that they've updated that effect when Avon and Jenna are drawn towards it.
No, they haven't. No, that's not updated. But Phil said before that it leads up to, there's a good build-up of tension, which I agreed with. I was a little bit disappointed when they actually got on the ship and it was just this bulging light up there. And then, of course, Blake was able to somehow not be tempted by it like everybody else was, and he just shoots it. And then
I was thinking about that because, that's a obvious plot point. Why was Blake able to overcome that? Is it the Federation's fault in the first place for tampering so much with his memories? Is that what allowed him to make the distinction between what was real and what was not? So it could have been the Federation's fault in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I saw it. That's exactly what I thought. He's had his mind tampered and save the others. So I don't know. I just thought I was a little bit disappointed because I was expecting some kind of monster or something horrific to be killing these people or making them mad, and then it was just memories.
I kind of agree with you in a sense that it does take them a lot longer to almost die than the guards. The guard seems to die quite quickly, whereas when we get on the ship, Blake and Jenna and Avon are investigating, and obviously with Jenna and Avon being able to fly ships and no computers, they spend a lot of time investigating before they're drawn into this thing, a lot longer than what the guards, which is like almost immediate.
There is one of the guards that there's sound effects, like he's going, whoa, and this kind of feels like he's being ripped away by something. So I get why you're saying that you were disappointed there wasn't a monster there, because the way that guard died, it sounded like there was one.
Well, that almost brings us to the end. We've already mentioned Riker has the horrible death at the end. There is that, once again, pretty lousy piece of direction, can I just say, where it looks like Riker has shot Blake. He falls down, and then suddenly we're inside the spaceship, and you got to go,
yeah,
what happened there?
What? That's right.
Thank you, Pennant Roberts.
Thank you, Pennant Roberts, because he does do that sort of thing quite a lot.
It's very good that Jenna can just flick. She works out that switch to flick.
Yes, this one's the door control. There you go. Anyhow, far more of the ship. Any other comments people want to make in terms of the episode analysis?
No, I just thought it was a great way to end as well, with Blake already sort of sacrificing the computer room earlier for the sake of the crew. Now he's wanting to turn around and rescue the crew. So we're getting a lot of a look at the character of Blake and where he's going. Great 2 parts so far.
Yep. And once again, it's another cliffhanger lead-in episode. We're quite used to a series of being released on Netflix now, and every episode follows every episode, and it's one overriding arch. This is actually still quite rare. This sort of thing wasn't done very often back in the 70s. Most stories would be standalone. So, Doctor Who would have its 4 parts, but it was one story, then another story. And on the whole, you could mix them up. It didn't matter what order you watched anything in. And most television at this time was, episodes were designed for syndication, which meant it didn't matter which episodes went out when. But the fact that you've actually had 2 episodes, which were actually in Australia, combined together as a movie, and you can already feel the next episode has to lead directly on. We actually have this very strong storyline. It's not going to keep going, by the way. Spoiler. It will come back as there will be an overriding arch to the next season. But generally speaking, these first few episodes are quite unique for television because and if you missed it, you missed it.
Yeah, you couldn't record it or anything like that. You didn't have that ability, or to watch it back later on demand, as they say. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see if next week's ratings hold up.
Well, last week we looked at Gareth Thomas as the first member of the regular crew. This week we're going to have a look at Sally Knyvette and her role. And Todd, I think you've got some things to talk to us about Sally Knyvette.
Well, I've got a few things to talk to talk to you about her. She did a lot of repertory theatre for over 7 years, a lot of acting mostly on stage and Shakespearean roles early in her career. And then, of course, she came to the role here in Blake 7 as Jenna. And she also was on the ITV soap Emmerdale as Kate Sugden. She actually acted opposite Fraser Hines.
Married to Fraser Hines for several years.
On that show, of course, people will know him as Jamie from Doctor Who. And then she made various other television appearances, Holby City, Casualty, EastEnders, Coronation Street, The Bill, General Hospital, Z Cars. So, she did a lot of one-off things. In terms of theatre, a lot of, it says here, 2 years with Mike Alfred's company, Method and Madness, and directing a number of productions in the early 2000s, including To Kill a Mockingbird. And then more recent, actually quite a few directing things here, Midsummer Night's Dream. And of course, more recently, she's been doing a lot of work in terms of Shakespeare workshops in France and London. That's what I've managed to glean. I'm sure, Philip, you may have even more.
I do, but I think it might also be good to hear from Sally herself. So Dwayne and I had the privilege of chatting with Sally a while ago, and so we might just flip to her for a little while, and she can tell us a few things about her time on Blake 7, and there'll be you'll be able to watch the full interview of this a bit later on. But let's just now turn to Sally.
Well, I had a very good agent at the time, and obviously I was young, and he started putting me up for televisions. And then I got a break to do a series in Greece where I played a junkie called Samantha, who was living with an older man. They were hiding up in the hills of Crete in caves, hiding from the police. And that was my first breakthrough. And I obviously was thrilled to get that. And while I was filming that, I didn't know, but David Maloney, the producer of Blake 7, came to watch me filming, but I had no idea he was there because he was looking for someone to play Jenna. And then I went back to England to do the studio productions, the studio scenes of that. And he approached me while I was doing that and said, would I like to come in for a chat?
What show was that?
It was called Who Pays the Ferryman?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Right.
so it was with Betty Alvrenetti and Jack Headley. And I was with Patrick McGee, who's long since died, but was a wonderful man, completely wild, Irish, alcoholic character, but such a brilliant, fascinating man who knew Samuel Beckett very well. So that was a very good start for me, getting that telly. And I'd done a few other things like Z Cars and, lots of the popular things of the day. But this was the big one that changed things at the time.
Now, you mentioned David Mahoney saw you he came and saw you in Crete originally, or just in the studio?
No, I think he did. I can't be certain on that. And he's no longer with us, sadly, so I can't ask him. He became a good friend. But he certainly came to see me in Birmingham, where I met him, where I did the studio stuff. And then I was brought in for a good talk at the BBC. Yeah.
So how did the process of Jenna happen? Were you given scripts? Did you audition?
No, I never auditioned. No, I know. I'd also done a big thing called Sarah, which was a documentary it was a docudrama with Nigel Hawthorne playing my father. It was called Breakaway Girls. That's right. And I think he'd seen that. And it was about a girl breaking away from her parents and doing her own thing. And I think he'd seen that. And that's what made him finally offer me the part. And no, I never had to audition. I think he'd just seen enough of my work to feel that I was right for that part. All I can remember is being taken in with some of the other cast, and we were all sitting on a table, and the producer came in and said, I think it was called Ronnie Marr, and he said, now listen, this is going to be a really major show. This is going to be Britain's answer to Star Wars. We're going to have £1 million to do it. And we thought, wow. But we had no conception become what it has become. And you don't, you just get on with the job, work from day to day under the given circumstance. But I was very pleased to get it.
So what were your first impressions of the cast? Did you know any of them beforehand at all?
Didn't know anybody, not a soul. I couldn't possibly tell you my first impression. All I can remember is that we had a really, really good team and we got on very well. I mean, Jan, who I saw yesterday, is still a great friend. We went to the movies together last night, Jan Chappell. So no, we're still, after all this time, apart from being survivors, we are still very close friends. Yeah, I mean, I got on with Gareth terribly well. We used to have a lot of fun. I mean, I sometimes think that must have come over, even though we weren't joking on screen, but we were very closely knit and we were working under a lot of pressure. And for me, scenarios that I'd never, ever done before. You know, I'd never been in what Paul Darius said, you've got to learn about a 5-camera studio, Sally. Well, how do I learn about that? Well, you'll learn eventually. And it wasn't very helpful. But I had no idea, you know, in those days, you had 5 cameras on you, and the more you understood how to work in front of those cameras, the better your performance. I'm afraid I didn't know what I was doing.
Now, my understanding is you were given like 4 scripts at a go. You had to learn the 4 scripts. You do all the because the Liberator set was so huge and complex. You had to film every script in that set for a week, going backwards and forwards between stories. Is that sort of how it was happening? Was it just total mishmash?
Not quite like that. I mean, we did in the studio, we did 1 episode at a time, okay? And we rehearsed it in the rehearsal room, and then we'd go into the BBC on the day of recording, and we'd have supper, which God knows why we'd have supper beforehand. We had supper, and then you had the 2 or 3 hours time slot to record what we'd rehearsed in the rehearsal room. But that was for the inside shots, the Liberator shots. We then had location stuff where you go away for 2 weeks, or maybe it wasn't as long as that. I can't remember now. Maybe it was a few days probably. And you go down to anywhere like Wookey Hole or Salisbury, Army Plains, or, you know, Dorking chalk pits, anywhere that could be conceived to be an outside location of a planet that we'd just arrived on. And these were done, from my recollection, those were done with virtually no rehearsal. That was for the sort of OB, outside broadcast, they used to call it. We didn't have much rehearsal. You just sort of did it. So it was a very, very odd combination of things. Massive pressure running up to the night of studio, and it had to be got in on time in those few hours. And if something went wrong, like one of the special effects blew up, or one of my angle poise lamp boosters fell off in my hand, we'd be losing valuable time to do the scene. And that awful feeling at the end of the evening when we've got 5 minutes left, come on, go, we've got to get that in, because if you went into overtime, it was obviously massive amounts of money they couldn't afford to go into. And again, if you were on outside broadcast, the weather suddenly became bad. I remember when we did an episode about moon discs, we were pulling these moon discs along the sand. Shadow, thank you, yes. And it was pouring with rain. And they kept trying to put up these enormous lamps which would make it look like a sunshine planet. And we'd be dashing out from under umbrellas trying to grab a scene and then going back in again, and trying to make it look like this incredibly hot planet. So there are all sorts of things that would cause problems, and very often the actual dialogue you had, or the scenes you had to play, were done under pressure because special effects or weather or time constraints were not working with us. So it was quite pressurized. But we never, to my knowledge, did 2 or 3 episodes at once, which I did massively in Emmerdale, but we never but it was, it was exciting, and I was learning on the hoof. I was learning my trade.
What was your opinion of the script?
Well, to begin with, I thought they were pretty good. Again, because I didn't have the knowledge of how to make a scriptwriter write for me in those days. I just took them at face value. And I probably didn't, if I'm absolutely honest, I didn't read the scripts in depth like I would now. I probably read them 3 or 4 times now and, make up a whole world. In those days, you'd look at your scenes and you say, yes, that's that and that. They were fine. They were good. But I became more and more frustrated, as I think is well documented, that I became more and more of a sex symbol. I wanted to be this intergalactic space pirate and, feisty woman who could do all the special effects like Sigourney Weaver. And every time anything dramatic happened, the boys would take over. And I this because it was you know, we were capable. Jan and I were very capable of doing all sorts of things, but it was you were sort of slightly pushed into the background as time went on. I was certainly given wonderful costumes. I was made to look great, but I wanted to get involved more deeply, I think. And as the script writing went on, it became more frustrating. And years later, at a convention, I met Terry Nation, and he said, "I wished I'd known you as a person." He said, because I felt I wrote well for the men. I wasn't so good at writing for the women. And if I'd known the sort of spirited person you were, I could have written a lot more for you. It was a very sweet thing to say, because it was a sort of acknowledge that the girls were sort of different levels of sex symbol, dominatrix, or whatever, you know.
I don't think Terry ever writes women well in anything. If he even
But
has
he actually, but for him to admit it to me and to be that honest and straight, I thought was very sweet. And I mean, it made an enormous impact on my life, all that, because, you know, it was very much the 70s at the BBC where the men dominated anyway, and you were, don't worry your fluffy little head about anything, just go and, you know, look pretty. And I just got very frustrated, and that's why I left. I decided to go to university, stop acting, actually, at the time. That changed. I did stop for 3 years.
So there was no opportunity in those days to say, speak with David Maloney about how you were feeling, and there's no input whatsoever?
I think I probably made so. I never remember. I was very young and I was very insecure, and I was a bit frightened of saying things. But I did. Looking through. Oh no, I'm saying the same things again this week. Same thing. God, you know. And I did make it known, but it wasn't. I didn't feel it was heard. And certainly after. But also, I think, you know, I could have done more as an actress to make them come to me more if I'd known more about the skills of acting. But it was my first big thing, and I just didn't know enough. God, now I could. But I you know, I was very fond of David. He was a lovely man, and indeed a lot of the directors were really, really terrific. And, you know, I probably did what they wanted me to do, which was, you know, fluffy blonde and, you know, do my angle poise lamps and but yeah, I would have loved to have done a lot more.
It was getting huge ratings and was a big success. Did that give you power, or not particularly?
No, I had no idea. I mean, I had no idea the huge rating. You didn't have social media in those days, and you had no idea. I mean, the first time I realised that this was probably something quite big was in between a filming session. I was up in Scotland, and I'd run out of money, and I was trying to cash a check, and I handed this check over. They said, no, you haven't got any ID. And then somebody's face popped up and went whisper, and oh, hang on a minute. No, we can cash your check. I said, well, what? Well, are you the actress in Bake 7? I said, yeah. And so they suddenly cashed my check. But that was the first time it really sunk in that, you know, I was in Scotland, and that something obviously quite powerful was happening. But you weren't aware of it. You just weren't aware of it in the way that I would be now. Now I really understand how I had no idea we would get. Was it 10 million we used to go out to, I think?
Yeah, yes, at least 10 million.
Hadn't a clue. I was just going about my daily business and life, and, you know, coping with, with the filming.
Right. So when they decided to write out David Jackson, kill him off, was that expected when they killed off that character?
No, I don't think. I mean, you know, we didn't know quite what had happened there. Again, it's not something you can talk about. I think we all felt very sorry for Dave, because I think he was very upset. And I remember he had this sort of scene where he died under some polystyrene bricks, which was very light. And it was that must have been very hard, because I think he would have been very aware of the popularity of the show much. But we all kept in contact then.
So when you decided to leave, was there any pressure to try and keep you to stay, or it was just okay?
No, I made it a fait accompli. I'd signed on for university. I said, that's it, I'm going. I'm sorry. I didn't give them an option. Gareth was leaving at the same time, both leaving at the same time. I can't remember his reasons. I think he just wanted to develop his career in different ways. And as I say, I wanted to go to university, but I don't think it sunk in, because I remember Fia Lorimer, who was one of the producers, directors saying at the leaving party when I left, he said, well, thank you for being such a vivacious and fun member of the cast, and good luck with your O-level. Now, O-levels are the sort of exams you do as a teenager.
Yeah.
I mean, that was there was slightly that attitude in the BBC. You know, girls took O levels, never very bright, and you wouldn't get on anywhere. I mean, he didn't mean it maliciously at all, but I was a bit in the back because I'd worked very hard to get into university quiet. Anyway, no, it was a fait accompli. I decided that was it.
Well, that was Sally Knyvette. And in a couple of weeks' time, you can watch that entire interview. I'll put up here. And so feel free to watch a whole interview with her. And she talks about her entire life and career. Just while we're talking about that role of Jenna, there were actually 3 actresses that were all considered for the role. And Sally won out. But Julia Vidler auditioned for the part. She'd come back in Angel, Shoestring, Sally Ann and others. But in Blake 7, she'd actually returned later in the season playing Avalon. So we'll see her soon. Susan Woodridge also reappeared. She's actually a BAFTA-winning actress. She'd go on to television roles like Jewel in the Crown, All Quiet on the Preston Front, and 20,000 Streets Under the Sky. And Candice Glenning would come back next season as Rochelle in Weapon. And I think we mentioned before, Arctic's Norman Tipton, he actually auditioned for the role of Villa, but missed out, and Michael Keating got the role instead of him. One of the things that they often try to do with Blake 7, the people who auditioned for the main roles, lots of them actually came back later on. So in a moment, we're going to give our scores for what we think about the episode. But just before we do that, Play of the Week. Who do you think had the most important role to play, either actor or creative, in terms of this week's episode? Who would you like to call out?
Oh, it's a tough one. I think I'm going to have to go Gareth Thomas, because it was a very good episode to establish his character. We got to know a lot about him, and I think he played off the guest cast and the upcoming regulars very well. So I'll give it to Gareth.
I'll give it to Terry. I think it was well written. It was a good second part to leading on to the first one. I think he put a lot into the episode, but it was done quite well, that it didn't seem like it was a lot. So yeah, I'll give it to Terry.
I'm giving it to Leslie Schofield as Raker, because he's really horrible and gets his just desserts, and is the catalyst for a lot of the relationships and people on board.
Yeah. In many ways, he's sort of the object of other people are going to be like him, but he's the first really evil in every way. Yeah, he's a great choice. Terry Nation, brilliant. Gareth Thomas does a great performance. I'm actually going to give it to Roger Murray Leach, the designer. I think the Liberator set and the Liberator ship are going to both be such major pivoting points for nearly every episode going forward. And so I just think the design of those two things are just utterly brilliant. And so I'll give it to Roger Murray Leach. And we'll just have to give our scores. Out of 10, Todd, what are you going to give this episode?
8.2.
8.2. Not 8.5?
Okay. Because it's better than last week.
And what did you give last week? You gave last week an 8.
8.
But you're not prepared to give it an 8.5, though?
No, I'm not prepared to do that, because I'm just going to wait and see what happens.
Okay, I'm looking for... Oh, Lord. Love it, Todd. Dwayne, what are you giving out of 10?
I'm giving it 8 because I enjoyed it less than last week. Just something about the visual style of the first episode appealed to me more. But story-wise, this was right up there too. So 8 out of 10 for me.
And it was a 9 last week you gave it? Is that right? Or an 8.5?
I think so. Can't remember. It would have been up there.
It was a 9, I think, last week. And Chris?
I'm going to give it an 8. Because I gave the first episode an 8, and I think I liked both of them just as much. So I think it was a good start to the series.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to give it another 9, same as last week, because you talked me down from my 10 for the first week. The question is, can it maintain it for another week? Next time we gather together, it will be Cygnus Alpha. Thank you so much.
See you later.
Thanks, Philip.
See you soon.
Next time on Blake 7, The Way Back.
This is Pamela Salem. Always were worried about the next job. Just occasionally, you think you've got a job to go to before one finished. And that was so thrilling, because usually it was, what am I going to do next? You always wondered if you were ever going to work again. I mean, I was often, I think, hired because I was a particular age or look or something like that. I think I did better work as I got older, because you're not so worried about if your eyelashes are going to fall off. You're worried about if you're getting, into the part. At least this is all me, what I was worried about. I remember having hysterics with Brian Blessed. I could not keep from laughing when I was with him. There's a couple of actors that are like that. And he just knew how to make us laugh.
Thanks for joining us on Blake 7 The Way Back, starring Todd Bilby, Chris Beer, Dwayne Bunny, Philip Edney, and special guest Sally Knyvette. Original theme by Joe Kramer. This episode, episode 2, Spacefall, was released in September 2025. It was recorded on the lands of the Wallumedegal, Wurundjeri, Kawakalaka, and Jurag nations, also known as Sydney, Melbourne, and a strange little island below the mainland. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a comment. Join us next time with episode 3, Cygnus Alpha, with special guest Pamela Salem.